Hello everyone, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Thank you for joining me in my little corner of the internet where I talk all things planners, fountain pens, and fountain pen inks. And today I wanted to broach a subject about really appreciating your collection and appreciating what you have and how you can actually do that. We're in this day and age, especially in the fountain pen hobby. Well, I say especially in the fountain pen hobby, but I think it's present in a lot of our day-to-day things where social media and just consumerism can be all-consuming and overwhelming. And while we're also trying to enjoy this hobby, it can be overwhelming if we have too many things being thrown at us all the time. So I wanted to share with you how I appreciate my collection, or at least try to, and what principles and basically what principles that I use on a day-to-day basis or even a month-to-month basis to make sure that I am using what I have. So really it comes down to this core philosophy of using what we have rather than always striving for something new. Buying things for someday can feel really good in the moment. And then once you actually receive the item, then that hit has left, has gone. So then what do we do now with all the stuff that we have? And the anticipation of a new purchase or chasing a new purchase can be such a thrill. And I think that's why so many of us do it. And sometimes the anticipation of buying something is better than actually receiving the thing itself. And that can definitely affect what we actually acquire and also how we use it on a day-to-day basis. I also wanted to look at really the difference between a more curated collection versus an overwhelming one. And that's different for every person. One person's overwhelming collection can be somebody's curated collection. So again, what I'm saying here is that it's a completely personal thing. And I've seen this in a couple of comments actually, where some people are like, who needs that many pens? And I'm like, well, you don't know what their collecting habits are, what their spending habits are. So it's really none of your business how many pens somebody has. That's their collection. And how they feel about their collection is up to them as well. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. I wanted to address this because throughout my fountain pen journey, I feel like I've gone through waves of feeling overwhelmed with my collection versus being really happy and being in fountain pen peace versus getting overwhelmed again and then burnt out. And this year in 2026, I'm really trying to make sure that I appreciate what I have rather than feel overwhelmed by it all, which can happen really, really easily. And I wanted to share some of the principles or some of the ways that I try to appreciate my collection on a month-to-month basis. Firstly, when it comes to fountain pen inks, I actually work through a bit of a rotation. And even though I'm not always buying new inks, there's still inks that I have in my what I call new ink rotation, or I even have like a whole ink holder that just holds inks that I haven't put in a pen yet. And then I have an ink sample vial holder of inks that I've already put in a pen, plus all of my bottled inks. So what I try to do with every currently inked is to make sure that I'm using ink from each of those different collections, each of those different categories. So the ones that are new, never been inked, the ink samples that have been inked, and my bottled ink. So I try to make sure that I'm using from every category to make sure that I'm not just using the new inks, but I'm also using inks that I've purchased years ago that are still inks that I love. So I shouldn't just be inking all the new. I should be using what I've purchased over time. So that ink rotation has actually really helped me to make sure that I'm using inks evenly, but also being able to give the new inks a turn in my currently inked as well. And let me know if you do something like that, or do you just use all the new inks, or how do you decide what you put in your currently inked pens? Along with that, I also do a rotation of my fountain pens as well. I actually have a spreadsheet, who's surprised, but I actually have a spreadsheet of all of my fountain pens. And then in that spreadsheet, I go through each month to see what I want to ink. And based on that, or based on the last time a pen was inked also determines when it's going to be inked next. So I try to make sure that there's an even rotation among all of my pens. And that ensures that I'm using my whole collection, but also it makes sure that I'm not just going for the same pens all the time. I'm doing an even rotation, trying not to pick favorites anyway, but trying to make sure that every pen gets its turn. And that also helps me to pick out any pens that are no longer bringing me joy. If I get to a pen rotation or a specific month and a specific pen and I'm so excited to use it, great. But then if I get to a specific pen and I'm like, do I really want to use this? It's going to make me think twice about whether or not this pen still belongs in my collection. So being able to do this pen rotation also makes me aware of whether or not a pen still belongs in my collection, and then I make the decision of whether or not to sell that pen. So the pen rotation has basically a few purposes. One, make sure that there's an even usage of all my pens, but two, it also helps to weed out any pens that are no longer bringing me joy. So win-win situation actually in that case for me. Do you do anything like that with your pens, or do you feel like you're choosing the same pens all the time in your currently inked? Let me know. Another one that some of us might be guilty of is buying a special pen or a special ink or even a special notebook and putting it aside and not wanting to use it, or even stickers, not even wanting to use those because we want to save them for a special occasion. What I say is just use them. Just use them, especially if you're afraid of running out. And somebody had mentioned that in one of my videos. It's the FORO, F-O-R-O, or fear of running out. I know some people who buy 2 sets of stickers because they want one to be able to put in their journals and one to just hang on to. And I understand that. Or people who buy multiple bottles of the same ink because they have a fear of running out. And we've seen this in a few brands where certain inks have become limited editions and are no longer available again. But, you know, for me personally, if there's something that is a special edition, or if I brand it as special, I don't think I actually do that with any of my pens or of my inks. I just want to make sure that I go through what I have and use what I have and not treat any specific one as if it's something that I can only use in a very, very special occasion. It's like that analogy that Kevin in Home Alone 2 said about his rollerblades. Let me know if you remember that. Basically, he said he was so afraid of wrecking his new rollerblades that he got for Christmas, and he was only ever using them in his room, that by the time that he wanted to go out and actually use them, he had grown too big for them. So that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of not using something and then come to a point where I'm like, I don't actually like this anymore, or I've grown out of that particular phase. So I want to make sure that I use what I have and use what I love in the time that I have it. Because I know for me personally, my collection is fluid, both my pens and my inks. So I think that the way that I use my pens and inks is also a reflection of where I am in my collection at that specific time. So being able to use all of what I have, or what I like at that specific time, for me keeps track of my different tastes at that time. And also, because I'm putting it in a journal or in my pen and ink journal or something like that, there's always going to be a record of how I've used it. It's not like it's disappeared into the ether. Even if I've run out of it, I've used it somewhere that I'll be able to reflect back on. So use that special ink, use that special pen, use that special notebook. Don't just save it to the side and, be afraid of running out, or, be afraid of wrecking it. Just use it. Just use it. One of the questions I had actually about being able to appreciate your collection and going through your collection. Do you think destashing is, I guess the question I have is destashing, is rotating things out just another way of consumption or consumerism? And that makes me think, because I'm the type of person who will sell my pens if they no longer bring me joy, or I think that they'd be better off in somebody else's home, and then use those funds to purchase a different pen, or just I guess do a rotation that way. What do you think? Is destashing just another form of consumption, or is destashing a way of curating your collection? I think for me personally, it really is a way of curating my collection. I know some people don't understand how I can do that, how I can purchase a pen and then sell it on a couple of years later. That's what works for me. I'm okay with my collection being fluid because I'm more of a user rather than a collector. But I also know that, and I feel like I'm a special case in this way, because I have a YouTube channel where I've been able to post my new pen day videos and my collection videos. I have that piece of history that I can go back and look at what my tastes were and what my collection was at a specific point in time. So having that, I feel like I'm in a better position to be able to say I want to let go of certain things, because I know that I'm at a different place in my collection than I was a couple of years ago. But I know that there are some people who have a harder time letting go of things, and that's okay. What works for me may not necessarily work for you. There's no one size fits all for how appreciating your collection works. It's more finding what works for you. And I think when it comes to videos like this, there's never one piece of advice that's never going to work for everybody, because we're all different. We all have different spending habits. We all have different tastes. We all have different ways that we approach our collection. So what I'm saying here may work for some, but not work for others, and that's okay. I know as well that being in my position, having a YouTube channel, puts me in a position where I am showing hauls or unboxings, and I know how that can have a role in fueling this more mindset. And that's also what I've tried to be intentional about with my channel as well. I'm trying to be more intentional about using what I have. And you know, there are going to be the new pen day videos or the new ink videos, but I'm always trying to be transparent about how I've purchased them or how I've acquired them. And also, many of my videos on a month-to-month basis are really showing how I'm using my collection, and I'm definitely mindful of that. But I'm also mindful of the fact that there are a lot of channels out there that I don't want to say encourage, but can definitely affect how I feel about that more mindset. So what I've been actually doing really in the last few months, because I've started to feel that there's just a lot of fountain pen and fountain pen ink content out there, I haven't been watching actually a lot of fountain pen and fountain pen ink content recently, because I'm choosing intentionally how much of that content I want to take in. When I first got into this hobby, I dove right in and wanted to take in every piece of content because I wanted to learn as much about the hobby as possible. I'm at the place in my hobby now where I'm pretty comfortable with what I have and what I know I love. So anything that I do watch, it'll be in support of my friends in the community, but also wanting to see what they're up to rather than really just digesting new pen content all the time, because I need that to, I say, fuel the fire for my mindset. But no, I've come to the point where I'm very picky and choosy about the content that I watch when it comes to fountain pens and fountain pen inks, but I've also come to the point where I know what I like. And I also know my own boundaries as well. I know what can overwhelm me and overstimulate me, and I'm trying to balance that. With my channel as well, I want to make sure that I'm showing you, how I'm using my pens on a day-to-day basis. There's definitely a difference between the way that, a flat lay looks versus how we're actually using it on a day-to-day basis. I'm showing you my desk, which looks actually very clean right now versus how I use it on a day-to-day basis. But I think one of the things we have to remember is that there's what we see on social media versus reality, and how someone is using their collection versus what they're showing can be completely different. And we have to remember that just because we're seeing somebody show something doesn't mean that's the way they're using it. So that's one of the things that I wanted to do with my channel, is just to be transparent about how I'm using my collection and really appreciating what I have. But again, when it comes to appreciating our collection, it comes down to finding joy in what we're using and how we're using it. I mean, how does it feel when you rediscover a pen and an ink combination, or a pen, ink, and paper combination? It's like you've touched a fountain pen or written with a fountain pen for the first time. Do you remember that feeling? And then finding the perfect pen and ink combination, or the perfect pen and ink paper combination, or writing with a pen that you haven't written with in months because it hasn't been in your mind to write with that pen, and then to be able to rediscover it. That's an awesome feeling. Awesome feeling. There's also the satisfaction of being able to finish an ink bottle or an ink sample, or to even finish an ink fill in a pen, or to finish a notebook. There's just something satisfying about being able to use what you have. There's actually a channel in Simone's Discord that is just titled, oh, I forget the name now, and I'm going to write it down here at the bottom because I completely forget, but it's actually just showing us using our stash and using what we have. So it's pictures of people's empty ink bottles, or empty sticker sheets, and empty washi rolls. There's a satisfaction of being able to finish something. And then we have to remember, why did we get into fountain pens in the first place? For me, it was because I was already journaling, I was already a planner, but discovering fountain pens took that one step further. Rather than just the experience of journaling or planning, it was also the experience of writing with an amazing tool like a fountain pen, but also with all of the beautiful inks. So we have to remember that even with everything that is out there, at the end of the day, it's our experience of writing that really matters. So yes, while we can have lots and lots of pens, how are we going to know how that experience feels unless we actually use our tools? So when it comes to wanting to appreciate your collection, I do have a couple of ideas that you can start off with. Like I said, first, doing an ink rotation. If you have categories for your inks of, your bottles, your inks that you haven't even put in a pen yet versus ink samples, working through those different categories and choosing inks from each of those categories when you're choosing your currently inked. My second idea, or the second thing that I'm using on a day-to-day basis, is having a pen rotation as well, making sure that each of my pens gets a turn. And right now, with how many pens I'm using a month, about 12 pens, it's taking a while to get through every single pen, but it means that I'm maybe using pens about 2 or 3 times a year. And that makes me think, is my collection, is the number of pens that I have too much to allow me to use my pens more than that? I would like to use my pens more than 2 or 3 times a year. And that makes me think, should I have less pens in my collection, or maybe use more pens every month? But again, it's more about making sure that everything gets used, and that's why I like my pen rotation and my spreadsheet for keeping track of that. And then another idea, and this one's just a really simple one as well, is a use it up challenge. So whatever you ink your pen up with, make sure you just use up that whole converter or that whole fill. The caveat to it though is that don't force yourself to finish it if you really don't like the pen and ink combination. I am also of the mindset of, if it's not something that I'm enjoying, don't force yourself to use it. That's the key, is finding the joy in being able to appreciate what you have. If you're forcing yourself to use things and not getting any joy out of them, then that defeats the whole purpose of appreciating your collection. If there is a pen that's not bringing you joy, an ink that's not bringing you joy, or a combination of both that is not bringing you joy, don't force yourself to use them. Find another way to, not even find another way to use them, but ask yourself, is it worth having these in my collection if I don't find joy in them anymore? And then one of the things that I'm also going to be doing myself actually is almost a spring clean of my collection and doing a little bit of a reorganization. I do that month to month anyway, when I unink and clean pens and ink new pens. I do a little bit of a reorganization, but also just what is the word that I want to use? A reassessment, I guess, of my collection. And, there are pens that I do sell on a month-to-month basis because, again, when I look at my collection, I think, are these pens that I still want to continue using? Do I still find joy in them? losing my voice here. So doing a little look at your collection, almost a before and after of before I've done a reassessment, and then doing a reorganization of them. You're also like touching your pens and playing with pens, and then just getting that tactile sensation of your fountain pens might give you an appreciation of what you have and knowing what it is that you want to appreciate. Okay. I know that was a lot of information that I covered in a very short amount of time, and it was kind of all over the place. But really the point of this video is to try and find ways to appreciate what you have. And that works differently for every person. What works for me may not work for you. But let me know down in the comments below what you do to help you appreciate your collection and use up what you have. All right, that is it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Otherwise, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe. Thanks again and have yourselves a great day.